Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep week 20 going with today's Tolkien Tuesday. Now, for all of Series 3, we are going back to Tolkien's youth and the story of the TCBS. And as I've been doing for a few weeks so far, I'd like to bring you to the incredible research and deeply human storytelling of John Garth from his must-read Tolkien and the Great War. But before I dive back into his work, I do want to remind you, please check out his website, johngarth.co.uk, where you can not only order Tolkien and the Great War, but other works of his like Tolkien at Exeter College or the gorgeous volume, The Worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien. And of course, you can get the audiobook version of Tolkien and the Great War, which John narrates a whole heck of a lot better than I read it here. Now, last time, and with a much better accent. Last time we read about young Tolkien's incredible gift for languages and the way that his linguistic world opened up when he acquired a copy of Chambers' Etymological Dictionary when he was 11. I might have been reading The Hobbit and Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia at that age. So yeah, an etymological dictionary. Impressive stuff. We took a look at Grimm's Law and philology and how languages are connected, and we agreed with Garth's conclusion that this was heady stuff for a young boy, but it would shape his life. Boy, did it ever. Now, even before Tolkien discovered Grimm's Law, he was inventing languages. In Tolkien's essay, A Secret Vice, he mentions Nevbosh, the new nonsense, a language that, as Dimitra Fimi and Andrew Higgins tell us in their critical edition of this essay, Tolkien co-invented with his cousin Marjorie Inkledon, and which was influenced by English, French, and Latin. Later they write that the next example Tolkien mentions in this largely reflective essay is his first ever private language created for his personal amusement only, and not belonging to a community of speakers, Nefarin. This language was inspired by Latin and Spanish, and according to Garth, was created in 1907, when Tolkien was 15. But as I'm sure you'll not be surprised to learn, that wasn't enough to satisfy young Tolkien. According to Garth, a former class teacher, George Brewerton, lent Tolkien an Anglo-Saxon primer, which he studied in his spare time. And then by 1908, he had discovered Joseph Wright's Primer of the Gothic Language, and this long-dead Germanic tongue on the edges of written history took Tolkien's linguistic heart by storm. I'm fairly sure that if I was fascinated by a virtually extinct language and had a habit of making up my own languages, I'd probably keep it to myself. Maybe not the sort of thing likely to drum up respect on the rugby pitch, for instance. But Garth tells us that Tolkien was actually quite talkative about it. Back to Tolkien and the Great War. Rob Gilson described him as quite a great authority on etymology, an enthusiast. And indeed, Tolkien once lectured the first class on the origins of Europe's languages. Against the classicist ethos drummed into King Edward's schoolboys, he played the outsider with verve, Garth tells us. He combatively told the literary society that the Volsunga saga, the tale of the dragon slayer Sigurd, displayed the highest epic genius struggling out of savagery into complete and conscious humanity. He even addressed one of the annual Latin debates in Gothic. Okay, that seals it. Speaking to the folks debating in Latin by using Gothic, that is a nerd's nerd right there. And I think we all just need to acknowledge our total and complete inadequacy, or at least I will. So here's the thing about Gothic. There's not a lot of actual known words. So Tolkien tried to think through what unrecorded Gothic words would be like. He came up with words, as Garth puts it, not randomly, but using what he knew about sound shifts to extrapolate the lost words on the basis of their surviving relatives in other Germanic languages. Now, eventually, he would bring in Christopher Wiseman to collaborate on this Gothic project. Garth quotes Wiseman as saying later on, "Reading Homer with Carrie Gilson sparked off in me what in Tolkien was already well alight, an interest in philology. In fact, John Ronald got to the point where he constructed a language L and another LL representing what L had become after a few centuries. He tried to inculcate me into one of his homemade languages and wrote me a postcard in it." Tolkien constructed a language, and then another language representing what that first language had become after a few centuries, you say? Quenya and Sindarin, anyone? Well, like we talked about a few weeks ago, Wiseman and Tolkien, the great twin brethren, loved to debate each other. Now, not surprisingly, they even argued about philology. But inventing languages was, according to Wiseman, and again thanks to Garth's research here, quote, a cornerstone of their youthful friendship. And while Garth tells us that it's unlikely that the wider TCBS joined in Tolkien's philological recreations at all, they would have at least been a good audience. Garth reminds us that these were boys who conducted debates in Latin and took part in King Edward's annual performance of Aristophanes in the original classical Greek. Tolkien himself played an exuberant Hermes in the 1911 production of The Peace, his farewell to the school. Wiseman appeared as Socrates and Rob Gilson as Strepsiades in The Clouds a year later. Garth continues that Smith alone of the TCBS, being from the school's modern or commercial side, did not study Greek. Perhaps this is why he was relegated to the role of the ass in one of the plays. Now there's John Garth's humor in that last line, and a reminder of the role that, well, let's be honest, I would likely have played in such a group of brilliant young men. But folks, this wraps it up for Tolkien Tuesday. Now next week we'll spend a bit more time with the TCBS as a whole as we continue these stories. And just a reminder, folks, if you don't own a copy of Tolkien and the Great War, take care of that right now by going to johngarth.co.uk. And do consider backing John's future work by supporting him on Steady. I'm proud to do so, and I hope you'll consider it as well. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support this show and get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a lot more. Finally, join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Word Nerd Wednesday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.